Hello and welcome to another edition of the Community Spotlight. We have a treat for you here today. We have a Renaissance individual we're talking with, and she is a former cosmetologist. She is an activist, part-time farmer. We'll get into that a little bit later, and an overall humanitarian. So, without further ado, here with us today is Amanda Taylor. Hello, Amanda. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
So, why are you here today?
I'm here today to bring attention to the need for Alabamians to stand up and speak to their legislative leaders and let them know that Alabamians need to have the right to safe access to medical cannabis.
Okay. Now, usually when somebody is an activist for such as this, there's a story behind it.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that you have your own unique story.
I do, indeed. I suffer from 6 debilitating diseases.
6?
6, yes. The first being PTSD. My father was murdered when I was 6 years old. And that even though we didn't know what PTSD was, it was something more along the lines of things that I held within, fears such as not going to sleep at night, being afraid that whoever murdered my dad would come and murder me. So as a child, I went without sleep because I felt the need to sit up and protect my family.
Well, you would at that age, yeah.
So, but I didn't know that that was PTSD. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Down the road, at the age of 17, I developed type 1 diabetes.
Wow.
I was the first person in Alabama to actually get an insulin pump. So I've always been my health has always been something that's very important. But at the same time, with that being said, I've always had a huge challenge with health issues. At the age of 25, I was diagnosed with cancer. And
wow.
Yeah, so I had uterine cancer, and I had a hysterectomy and localized radiation. So thankfully, I can say that I've survived and beat cancer, but I didn't take any chemo treatments because of how I feel about what they do.
Right. All right, so you had a lot of health challenges early in life, as well as the trauma of seeing your father murdered in front of you. All of that causes a lot of great stress on the nervous system.
Yes.
And, a stressful nervous system can manifest itself in various other type anomalies and malaises that you can experience as far as health challenges is concerned. And tell us a little bit about the melding together of all those and what it did to you psychologically. Yeah.
Okay, let me make a small correction. I didn't see my dad's murder, but the aftermath is something that no child should have to deal with.
You got there just after it had happened, correct?
Yeah. So the things that it did psychologically, at 6-year-old, you should be thinking of bugs, frogs, trees, butterflies, rabbits, and squirrels.
And how many cooties boys have.
Right.
Right.
100%.
Right.
Yes. But instead, I was always, it might not be something that, say my mother would say she was a very unruly child. It didn't manifest in that way. It manifested in ways she had no idea about, such as not sleeping at night. And then my mother worked an extreme amount. So there was, my mother, and I'll say this up front, my mother was an amazing woman, but there was also abandonment issues because you have one parent who is dead, and then the other one has to work so much to pick up the slack, but that created an abandonment issue.
Right.
Sort of sense.
Not intentionally,
Not
but I mean,
intentionally, no.
it was just, it happened.
Yeah, it was just, something that was very unintentional on her part, but at the same time, she had to do what she had to do to feed us. But when you're a small child and you're going through something so traumatic, none of that matters, nor does it make sense. So that manifested to me in ways of, when I was 17, I developed type 1 diabetes. And so it wasn't one of those things where they said, okay, take a pill and change your exercise. We're going to see how this works out.
Not with type 1, no.
They, immediately, you're going to start injections in the morning. That was the longest shower I've ever had in my life. Because, they said, get everything ready, take you a shower, and then take your injection. I stayed in that shower till I wrinkled up.
Right.
But with that being said, I was on 6 shots a day.
Wow.
Yes, I was on 6 shots a day. And so it was very hard to maintain and balance my blood sugar. So many things, and I didn't really understand at the time that emotional things, and so all those things that had carried with me from childhood that I had just, I learned to manage life with those things, but I did not realize that they were creating more health problems for me.
Right.
So, with the lack of sleep, with, all those different things.
All the stressors.
Type 1 diabetes, immediately onto shots. And then it went on a wild spiral because everything within my body just malfunctioned. My appendix, my gallbladder, I absolutely have nothing in me that's not a vital thing.
Really?
Except for my tonsils, and I say that real quiet because they don't know they're alone.
Right. You don't want something to happen. They have to be taken out at your age,
Right.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's traumatic to say the least, and type 1 diabetes is one hell of a diagnosis. Lots of people are born with it.
Yes.
To develop it later on, as you did, is not so common.
No, it's not, and they said that, I never really got a deep explanation, but they said that at the age that mine developed, it was not child and not adult onset,
Right.
so they would say yours is just more hardcore. Every time I would face something, they would say yours is just more hardcore, and I would say, do you mean brittle? And they would get offended, they would say, no, we don't use that terminology anymore, brittle diabetic. I'm like,
Right.
well, okay.
But I mean, so you were a young woman. You had to eventually have a career and move out and move on.
Yes.
So how did all these health challenges affect you pursuing a career?
Well, that's another way that I think I damaged myself a little bit because I hid it. So I was the first person in Alabama to receive an insulin pump, but I would hide it underneath my clothing because I did not want to allow anyone to see me other than something strong and fierce in business. And so I thought if they saw something, a health issue can be looked at as a weakness. And so I didn't want anybody to think I wasn't capable of doing those things. And so I set some huge goals for myself, and I mean lofty, huge bucket list goals for career. And happy to say I completed all of them and then just kept making more and then repeating. However, as the years progressed, the disease couldn't be hidden.
Right.
So then I realized that wasn't a weakness, but a strength.
Okay.
So I flipped the script.
How did you interpret it as a strength?
So what I did was say, this is something I have battled, something you haven't known about, but something I've battled since I was 17. And, there would be times where maybe I did have to cancel, reschedule on some folks. And so I would just use the utmost best customer service that I knew how to do, and maybe cut a deal, or if someone missed out on an appointment, I made sure that even though nobody wants to miss out on an appointment, I made them almost wish that I had to reschedule on them again.
Right.
So I just had to, on my own, find ways to flip the script to where that wasn't looked at as a weakness, and people were not angry if I did get sick. And then
And you're able to intertwine it with your career and it not being too much of an inhibiting factor.
for the most part, I did, and I would. There was a lot of times that the serious health issues kept me from working, and early on in my career, I would make up something, and you know, something came up, and then I realized that it's just better to be transparent, because you never have to worry about someone finding out down the road and then exposing
Them using that against you in some way.
Yes, and so that's something that I finally was like, okay. Then I would just say, you know, I am truly sorry, and I would tell them what I was going through, and then they'd be amazed at all that I actually could do and did do. So there were a few people who were, you're not going to please everyone.
Right.
And there were a few people, like, I was the first person in Alabama to get an insulin pump. And so being the first at stuff, there's a lot of things that you have to work through, like these little alarms that would go off, and you would have to check your blood sugar and regulate, and there, all of this stuff was, I actually called the company to find out how long I had been a customer, and they said, Amanda, you've been with us longer than we've been Medtronic. There used to be a company called Mini-Med, and so they sold out. They don't even, like, I've been with them since before some of the people that work there has been a part of it. But there was a lot of kinks that they had to work out, and so I'd have clients who would just be extremely rude. So when the bells and whistles stuff went off to alarm me that I needed to check on myself, you know, and so I realized pretty quick, like, that I was in high demand, so I would just remove those people from my life. If you could not appreciate my talents and overlook that I do have some health issues, then you're just removed from my circle. And it didn't matter. I remember telling one of the most wealthy women in our town that I'd never be hungry enough to do her hair again, and that if she couldn't treat people with more respect and humanity, then she needed some form of treatment that I couldn't give her.
Well, lots of times, you know, the exceedingly rich or just, you know, the wealthy people, they tend to look down at the common, you know, others not so rich as peasants.
Yes.
And they tend to treat you like one. And a lot of times they do need to be brought back into reality.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
About 10 years later, I guess she thought that was a grace period long enough, but about 10 years later, she'd actually made one of my assistants cry. She refused allowing my assistant to shampoo her hair, and my assistant had told her that my blood sugar was low and that I was going to need 15 minutes to bring it back up. And she was so rude to her that she made her cry. And so, you know, 10 years passed, and she calls for an appointment, and I reminded her of why she hadn't been in my chair in about 10 years. And I said, I you know, that female does not work for me anymore, but I still respect her.
Right.
And I made a vow that day that I would never be hungry enough. And
well, good for you to do that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you spend a large part of your time now as an activist. You belong to the organization known as RAMP, which is the Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, which works avidly for legislative changes.
Yes.
And you also are part-time into growing hemp.
So
is that what I heard correctly?
I'm extremely full-time. Like,
oh, okay.
I had said that I was going to just work part-time, and so I actually left the state of Alabama to tell you how I got connected with RAMP. I actually left the state of Alabama because they wanted to put a gastric pacemaker in my stomach.
A gastric pacemaker.
A gastric pacemaker. I had gotten down to 99 pounds. They had discussed a feeding tube or a gastric pacemaker, to which neither of those I agreed with. And they had tried me. There's 3 different pharmaceuticals for gastroparesis, which all of them have very, very harsh.
So yeah, that's another problem you were diagnosed with that you haven't mentioned.
Yes.
Gastroparesis.
Yes. So it's a paralyzation of the vagal nerve, and it actually does not communicate to tell your body to dump your food into your intestines to digest. And so the doctors told me that it was completely paralyzed and that I would have to have a gastric pacemaker to make it work. And so I had done some research, but most of the time when people were as sick as what I was, I had been taking CBD oil, but at that time, and let me say this, at that time, it was still illegal for whatever reason in Alabama to get CBD oil. And so I had been taking CBD oil, and I could tell some changes that, and I was not even taking it correctly. I wasn't taking enough, but I could tell some changes. And so after that, I had all kinds of people in my community because, like I told you, I was very anti. I was the president of DARE when I was a kid, and I was very anti everything. And I had preachers and, all kinds of folks asking me, they would see me I literally looked like walking death. People either thought I was dying of cancer or I was cracked out.
Right.
To which most people knew,
You were
neither.
neither. Yeah.
Neither of those, yeah. So with that, wanting to put a gastric pacemaker in me, I asked them, one of the medications they put me on was Marinol. Marinol is synthetic THC, which is usually meant for cancer or AIDS patients at the end of their life, to give them the ability to have an appetite increase, to fight the nausea a little bit. And so it was destroying me. Literally, that's not a long-term use medication, and it was destroying me. When I first started taking it, I could tell some difference, and I was very excited about that. However, it made me question everything I had ever thought. And so it made me start studying medical marijuana, cannabis,
Because you knew the THC was synthesized and they were using it.
And they were using it.
Yeah.
And if that's making a difference, and the CBD was showing some changes, would medical marijuana and so as much as I was anti that, I started letting those people that every time they would see me, they'd be like, "You need to eat a cheeseburger." So I let them start bringing me cannabis, and so I actually started trying it, and I didn't get crazy, and I didn't, all the reefer madness that I had.
Oh heavens! That whole series is laughable.
It is.
I've actually sit and watched all those movies and series, and it's absolutely absurd. It's almost zero correct information.
There is zero. There's. But
I've been around people smoking pot all my life,
right.
And I've never seen anybody gorked out and getting crazy and going insane like everybody tends to want you to believe. Most of them just do want to eat a cheeseburger and crash out.
Well, and with that being said, I also knew people that did use it, and they would use it and go clean their house, and it wasn't like everybody that used it was
crashed
walked
out
into the couch dead, dead to the world. It wasn't like that.
Well, it's like any other medicine, it is specific to a person's body chemistry. I would imagine.
It is.
I know there's one person, if they snort cocaine, they go to sleep. So it's the same thing,
Exactly.
you know, that person smoked pot and then they'd be very active. So it all depends on the individual.
It does. And so when I left Alabama to become a medical refugee. So I actually ended up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I wanted to know for myself.
Well, that's a pretty dramatic term. That's a pretty dramatic thing to have to do to be a medical refugee.
It is. And at the time,
Because refugee connotates, you know, the last desperate effort.
yeah, last ditch effort is what I actually said. This is my, and I actually never thought, I almost tear up when I say this as I see where I am now. But I literally thought when I left Alabama that I would not live. You know, and that's when I say refugee, I meant that to the fullest extent of the meaning of that, because I had no guarantees, no clues, no anything. I wanted to research for myself. I didn't want what Billy Bob had told me. I didn't want.
Oh yeah, you wanted the actual facts, the scientific. Well, what made you choose Arizona?
So, with looking at the different laws, you know, everybody says, why didn't you go to Florida? Why didn't you go to some of these states that are a little closer? Well, because their laws were not nowhere near what I knew I needed as a medical patient for me to be able to actually do what I would consider a viable research for myself. And so I looked into all the different states, what their laws were, and then I actually, with me doing hair, I had a lot of connections. And one of the places that I had picked, I was like, well, Arizona, I would be acceptable with some of the laws that they have. And there was a couple more places. I did not want to do Colorado. I didn't. And with that being said, I landed a job in Arizona that would give me a territory over an enormous part of Arizona that I've always wanted to see. And so I thought, hey, you know, I'm going to get this job and I'm going to see parts of the country that I've never seen, and I get to test this out and see if medical marijuana is what people says it is, or if it's just, you know, just a...
But that is a dramatic thing for someone to do, to go from being anti all drugs to uproot from a homestead and go 3,000 miles away as a refugee just to seek help and relief.
But I thought I was dying.
Right.
So there's
people
no
do
fear.
desperate things
There's
when they
no
think that.
when
yeah.
you think that you are dying, when you look in the mirror, and I wished I had brought this, and I will share it with you when I've just moved, and when I relocate this again. This is an example. Man, this almost makes me cry, but when I left here, I had dealt with an opiate addict who had put me in serious fear. And so when I left here, I was kind of in hiding for a little bit. And until I could go through with a divorce and things. And so some friends of mine were nice enough to hide me out.
Okay.
And so I was very sick, and I got sick with a gastroparesis, and stress makes that even worse, like it does everything else. But I got really sick, and a lot of times like I could feel it coming, but this one was just very fast, and I threw up all over myself. I didn't even have time to bend and move. And there was a 7-year-old little boy that was in the room with me, and he said, "Hang on, Miss Amanda, I'll get you something." And I was sick, and I was like, "Oh, I need a shirt." And, you know, I'm just saying like what I need. And he went to his room, and I was thinking in my mind, why didn't he go to his mother's room? Right? So he comes back, and he has this little shirt. And even though I saw myself every day, I didn't see myself the way that I would see people see me, and they would... And I didn't like seeing myself, but I didn't see myself the way that they did.
Right.
But this little boy, he ran to his room, and he got this tiny little shirt, and he helped clean me up. And I was so proud of that little boy for, jumping in and helping me.
Mm-hmm.
And he hands me the shirt, and he said, "Now, Miss Amanda, go in the bathroom and finish cleaning yourself up. I got you a shirt." And I walk into that bathroom, and I was like, I looked at him, and I called him by name. I said, "Sweetheart, this is not gonna fit me."
Right.
He said, "Yes, it is, Miss Amanda." And to appease him, I went in the bathroom, and I finished cleaning myself up. And I was going to put that shirt on and show him that it didn't fit. But I literally fit into a 7-year-old's t-shirt.
Wow.
I was that sick. So when I say...
So he saw that he gauged your size correctly.
He did. And even though I couldn't see it, and even though I knew that I had to go and get help, until he handed me that shirt.
So, he was the catalyst for you taking action.
To go as far away as I did, because I was trying really hard to stay somewhere. Even though I did have fear, I was trying to stay somewhere where I could at least get to people.
Mm-hmm. That you knew.
That I knew.
Mm-hmm.
But when that happened, I knew that if I didn't get somewhere and get somewhere fast, that I was going to die.
So you went to Arizona, how long after that event?
About a week.
And you went alone?
Well, I actually had a friend who, at the same time, and this is another story about opiate addiction, but she was dealing with her parents' opiate addiction. She ran a family business,
mm-hmm.
and her parents were using the company vehicle
mm-hmm.
to get opiates. And so she shut the business down, and she was so sick of dealing with her family's opiate crisis
mm-hmm.
that she said, "I'm shutting this business down and I'm getting out of here." And I said, "Well," she said, "Would you like to have a roommate?" And I said, "Sure."
Mm-hmm.
And so she was the only human that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had looked at the different laws, and she was a person that she'd used cannabis. She was actually somebody that was helping me get cannabis
mm-hmm.
at the end before I left. She knew someone who grew it, and that's one of the things is that in Alabama you don't know what you're getting. Billy Bob might be growing that in soil that's got heavy metals. You don't know that,
right?
Or using pesticides, and you don't know that,
mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. But so she knew
tainted with Roundup, or
right, and very well could be. And someone who has severe health issues, as I do, doesn't need something like that.
right.
And so that's where, when some people are against any kind of control of it, or how do you say it? Not
regulation.
Regulation's the word I'm looking for. Guys, I do suffer from multiple sclerosis, so when I say something and I don't have words...
So multiple sclerosis, that's another one.
There you go.
You haven't mentioned that yet.
I haven't, I like to leave some things...
So when were you diagnosed with multiple sclerosis?
That was actually this year, and that's something that I was misdiagnosed 13 years ago, and they had found 8 spots on my brain, and that's the words that they used. They didn't use lesions. They said, "We found 8 spots on your brain. It could be this, it could be this, it could be scar tissue from migraines, or it could be MS." I was like, time out. How do we rule out MS?
Right,
yeah, it's like, that was the first thing I said, is how do we rule out MS? And they said a spinal tap. Nobody wants to do that, but I didn't want to wonder if I had, multiple sclerosis.
The movie Spinal Tap was interesting, but I bet the procedure's not quite as interesting.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'd rather watch the movie.
Yeah.
I'd rather watch the movie.
Yeah.
Definitely. That was about 6 hours of torture that I don't ever, we'll never do that again.
So what did they discover when they did the Spinal Tap?
They told me that I did not have MS. And so they actually just chalked it up to all these years of diabetes that I was suffering in different areas and so forth and so on. And Actually, this past year, I started blacking out in the shower. Not like any other time. It was
That could be dangerous.
exactly.
You could, fall and kill yourself.
And I did fall twice before. I fell twice, and I am someone who listens to my body. And the week before, I was just like, something is just totally not right. I'm exhausted in areas that I shouldn't be. And since moving back to Alabama, I do not have safe access to the things that I need as far as medical marijuana, cannabis, whatever folks want to call it. I have such a hard time with the fact that when I was in Arizona, I went from 99 pounds and barely working here to actually working for Arizona medical marijuana doctors, Green Farms Dispensary, as well as...
Well, so you went both feet forward, full into this realm of cannabis medicine.
Absolutely. When I got my medical card, this job that I was supposed to get fell through. And so I had already moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, and anybody that knows anything about that place, it's extremely expensive. So I was counting on this job that didn't happen. So I had became a card-carrying, proud card-carrying medical marijuana patient. And so I went into the dispensary, and I'd been searching for a job. My cosmetology license didn't transfer, so, I said there was a huge, when people say, send me a sign, here's your signs, because everything did not work out as what I tried to plan. And so I was in that dispensary, and I felt the same way that when I was doing hair, I was extremely passionate about it, and I dove into it and learned things.
Because you truly enjoyed it.
Very passionate about it, enjoyed it. So when I started seeing what CBD changed for me, then I started seeing what cannabis was not the beast that everybody was, trying to make it out to be, and how beneficial that it actually was. Then I became bold, and I started, posting things on Facebook and actually sharing my life where I could have lived in Arizona quietly.
You didn't go into the bit, you went to Arizona as 99 pounds and very sick, and then you skipped to the part to where you working in the industry. What was the experience like initially using cannabis and seeing the positive benefits?
Well, first of all, going into a dispensary was very overwhelming, because I was so... When someone here would say, I've got some Granddaddy Perp for you, well, I didn't know anything about strains, and so I would say, I don't care if that's Uncle Joe's dirty sock. If it makes me stop throwing up, I don't care. Now, once I actually went to Arizona and was a medical marijuana patient and could go in and talk to the dispensary agents and say, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm dealing with, and what do you recommend? And then for myself, try this and try this and try the different forms, because there's flowers, there's edibles.
Well, see, that's what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people just think, oh, marijuana is marijuana. So what you're saying is the trained medical professionals in Arizona would be able to determine what specific strain or breed or marijuana that you needed for your particular ailment.
Yes, yes.
And see, that's what people don't understand. Because marijuana is not just marijuana.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. One of the ways that I try to explain this, someone in my family had the most beautiful roses. They were all roses. But this one was an imperial, and this one was, Queen's whatever. And so with the different strains of cannabis, you have indica, you have a hybrid, and you have a sativa as far as what they're grouped into. And indica has more of the full body I always tell people, indica in the couch. It is one that relaxes you more. A sativa is something that is more stimulating, and someone like me, who I did not know that I was struggling with MS at the time, but I have had MS after actually getting to the right doctor and disgusting symptoms. I've actually had MS since I was about 13 years old.
So how long did it take you from getting there and starting the protocols to where you were, not completely better, but you were able to function more normally and start seeing a future rather than thinking you're going to die?
2 weeks.
2 weeks is a relatively short period of time for that drastic of a change.
But when you go from waking up, and let me explain gastroparesis for those that don't know. You literally wake up every day of your life with flu-like symptoms. So imagine for just 1 minute, I don't know how many of you've ever had the flu, but if you've had it one time, just imagine waking up every day of your life with flu-like symptoms. Then you have to battle the horrific nausea on top of everything that your body's feeling. There's a very high suicide rate with people with,
I could imagine,
with
yes.
gastroparesis. So when you go into a dispensary and they say to you, and I'm telling you, I'm straight suburb. I mean, grew up in the country, but from an adult on, it was basically suburb living. I was always at the salon working, or I was in different cities traveling. So,
Right.
But
You're an urban person.
I didn't know anything. I had no knowledge on. I knew that there was edibles. I knew that there was vapes. I knew that there was something called dabs. I knew that there was. I knew of things, but I had never actually seen things or seen the medicinal benefits. And so the first week when I was in the dispensary working, or excuse me, as a patient, I'm telling them about me being so sick that I would throw up and be in ICU for 3 to 7 days without them being able to stop me from dry heaving. So think about what your body does in 3 days' time, like all the pulled muscles in my back and all
everything's just,
yeah.
I mean, it exhausts you.
Yes. And so this guy looks at me and he goes, you just need THCA. And I said, what's that? And he pulls out this little, and I was like, hey, now, I'm a little Southern girl. It looked like crack. It kind of looked like crack or cocaine. I did not know what it was. So I immediately did the thing that I hate the most, and I judged. Straight up judged it. And I said, I'm not using that. And he said, look, Amanda, he said, they had tried to get me to do the dabs, and I was like, no. Anything that involves a torch or, and things like that, I was like, no, I don't have any.
Sounded too medieval to you, did
Yeah, I was like, I'm no. And I looked at him, and I was like, no offense, but I'm a little too classy for that. And I want to feel like a crackhead. I don't want to be high. I want to be
out
healthy.
of pain.
I want to be not puking, And so the little thing was about $50. And I looked at him and I said, no. And he said, I tell you what, I know you don't understand this. So he goes and he gets this little tool and he opens the container and he pulls up, and it was the smallest amount of this stuff. And I'm looking at it, and he said, I assure you with everything in me, if you start throwing up, you take your flour that you have in your bowl and you sprinkle this on top of it. One hit, you're going to stop vomiting. And I looked at him, and I just looked at him as if he owed me money. And I said, no, I won't. And he said, listen to me. Your second hit, the nausea will 100% go away. On that third hit, you will eat everything in the house. And I just laughed and I said, oh boy, you apparently don't know what it's like to throw up, because you got to work your way back up. You start on liquids, and then you start on soft foods, and then you go, and I've been
You knew more than he did.
Oh yeah, I was just railing and telling him how it was going to be. And he was like, he gave it to me for free.
Did he?
He did. He said, ma'am, he said, He was looking
Just
at
to
me
prove you wrong.
to prove me wrong. The way that I do other people, he did to me. And so, so he gave me this $50 product. And, you know, as the powers that be would have it, next couple days, I'm about ready to go to the ER. And then I remembered that he had gave me that. And my roommate, she was at work, and we had just stocked up the groceries. I mean, everything was stocked up. And so she calls me that morning, and I was so sick, and I'm throwing up, and she said, do you need me to call an ambulance? Do you need me to come home from work? Like, tell me what I can do. And I was like, nothing. I said, if I get bad enough, I'm going to call the ambulance. And she was like, you're making me a nervous wreck. She said, if you call the ambulance, you promise to tell me, or just call me before, and I'll come home. You don't need to call an ambulance. And it's hard for me to ask people for help. I don't like to be a burden. And I said, I promise you, if I go for help, I'll call you. And so she called me a couple hours later, and I had not used the stuff yet. And it sounded like something out of The Exorcist. And she said, I'm leaving work. And I said, no. I said, it's getting better. Even though she just heard all that, I was like, it's getting better.
But even up to that point, when you were in such pain, you were bloody-minded enough not to want to use that product.
Well, I'd actually forgot. Like, I had smoked.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because I was learning what strain fights nausea and what strain, will increase an appetite. And I was really sick, and I was trying to find my notes because I was, like I was saying.
So you had forgotten completely about that dubious-looking stuff that he gave you.
Yes, I completely forgot. I was looking through my notes, and then I was like, THCA. I was like, where is that crap? I called it crap. I literally called it crap, and I feel so bad after that. But I called it crap, and I got it out, and I did what he said, and I sprinkled the amount he put on it, and I took one hit, and I was like, and I'm telling you, I'm a patient that would do Finnegan suppositories. I would have to go and have them inject anti-nausea medications in me, and I would still be in the hospital in the ICU for days and days and days and days. So that's why I was like, I don't believe that. So that first hit, I was just like, wait, what? Then I was like, he said, so I did the second hit. Now he said, that third hit, you're going to want to eat everything in the house. And so, literally, that third hit, I ate everything. And when I say everything, and normally also, whenever I would get sick like that, I'd be in bed for 2 days. Because my body would be in so much agony from going through
all the
that.
muscle constrictions and everything.
So I called my friend, because I ate everything in the house, like everything. Things that didn't even make sense to me. Things I didn't even like.
Weird combinations.
And not starting out liquids. I'm telling you, I went straight to that kitchen, and I was like, I want a ham sandwich. Like, that was the first thing I thought of. And then I was like, I want this, I want that, I want that, and I want this, I want that. And so I look around, and I'm like, I've ate all the groceries. Like, I've literally, and we were roommates, and it was like, so I needed to go, I'd ate some of her stuff. So, it's okay that I ate my stuff, but I'd ate her stuff as well. And so when I call her to let her know I'm okay, she said, are you at Walmart? Because she could hear the registers. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, you sound magnificent. And I said, well, with that being said, I ate all your food. And she said, what did you just say? Because she had been with me and seen me in those states. And she was just amazed as I was. And so I said, yeah, I had to come by to replace what I said, I can't believe what that guy said was true. And so I got to go back and tell him, that he was 100% true. And so I went back to him to tell him, like, how I looked at him, and I'm like, nothing on this planet has stopped that.
I hope you apologized to him.
I did. In the most true Southern Belle way that I could.
Right.
I literally, it's not easy for me to admit I'm wrong. But admitting that I was wrong and then apologizing for how...
Well, just quickly, you judged him, yeah.
Yes. And so I looked at him and I said, you are my guru. and I want to learn from you. And so he didn't know it, but I had been, the cosmetology license didn't transfer, and so I was looking for a job, and he said, bring in your resume, and I looked, and there was a stack of resumes on the table about that big.
So he was actively seeking somebody.
Well, it's a college town, and it's a dispensary.
All right.
So there's a lot of turnover. So
Right.
like he was looking for more people that were, I think he saw something in me that he knew that I was on a mission, even more than I knew. And so I had my resumes in my car, and I walked back in, and I'm looking at all those resumes, and I'm like, man, well, there was a garbage can right there. So I just raked those resumes off into the garbage, and I put mine on top.
Did you really?
I did.
That's so funny.
But here's the thing. I didn't think about and didn't know until I worked there, but dispensaries are heavily, security is different than most places. There's 36 cameras in a very small building, so all that was captured on video. So, and they actually liked that because it was like,
Well, that showed you had guts and conviction, and you were confident in yourself.
And so, but with that being said, I applied, and I did get the job, and I quickly moved up in the industry, and I went from being what's called a bud tender, that helps patients when they come in, to actually helping manage and run. I had the keys to the dispensary, and I also went to work for Arizona Medical Marijuana Doctors and Mad Terp Labs, which is a concentrate company. So I went from 99 pounds and barely able to work to working like 80 hours a week and attaining.
And feeling healthy.
Feeling healthy, yes. And when I had off time, I was hiking. So,
Well, I mean, that sounds brilliant. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better than that. We're in a studio in Wadley, Alabama, and this isn't Arizona. So something made you leave that utopic environment that you're describing and come back here to Alabama.
I let everyone know that I was led. I'm a very spiritual being. And I went on a hike one day, and I was led to come home, and I was arguing with myself. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but you don't.
Oh, frequently, yeah.
You don't.
Sometimes I lose the argument.
Yeah, well,
too.
I was going to say, it's interesting when you lose because it changes everything. But I argued the fact that I couldn't come back here because I was very vocal. I would post pictures on Facebook with me at work with all the marijuana and all the stuff, and so I was.
So you couldn't do that here.
Yeah, I was like, I can't go into that industry. I can't. I was confused at why I was actually led to come home. CBD at the time, when I was out there for a while, was still illegal in Alabama, and they took, certain people would send me things and have me test it with all the labs equipment that we had out there, because sometimes, unfortunately, with products like that, people will say there's 2,000 milligrams of CBD in the bottle and there's not, or whatever, and so.
You get that a lot with nutraceuticals too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so people would ask me to send them stuff, and I didn't want to mess up anything with me being a dispensary agent or anything like that. And so.
Yeah, you didn't want to compromise your legal standing in Arizona.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I would send them to a certain lady who would send me stuff, and I would test it, and then I would let her know what she should sell and what she shouldn't sell. And so, I'm like, I do enough. I don't want to go back there, and I can't live the way I need to live there. And looking at everything that I did, I was like, even though I felt led, and I knew that one day I would either speak before Senate or Congress or both. And so if I did those things, even though that is major industry experience, that would not be looked at in Alabama as something that, had any.
It's sad but true. Yeah.
So with that being said, I cried out and I asked, if I'm supposed to go home and I'm supposed to do this, then where's my street cred? Like, that industry experience should be street
Where's
cred.
my validity?
Validity, yeah, you gotta have validity. So the next day I had a phone call from somebody that was asking me to apply for a job at the Department of Economic Security in Arizona, and I said, what are you saying? You know what I do. I mean, I am always in the public. I am always, actively, what I do is not hidden.
Right.
And she said, I know that, but I need you to think about retirement. And, she started talking about things that, medical benefits, insurance, and, different things.
Element,
Yeah.
Didn't need that because it failed you in the beginning. That's why you were there.
Yeah. And so, but with that being said, I'm still diabetic, and that is extremely expensive. Some diabetics unfortunately die because they cannot afford their insulin. Right. So I have to have medical insurance. There's no way for me to live without medical insurance. And so that kind of piqued my interest a little bit, and I'm thinking, And I said to her, I can't pass a drug test. You know this. And she said, well, you need to know this. We don't test when you come into a position. The only time you're tested is if you are showing signs that you are not holding up to your job requirements. That is the only way and the only reason we test. So I accepted that challenge. I saw it as another challenge. And another thing she said to me is, you'll have to work on the interview because you're a good one-on-one person, and you'll talk to somebody and you'll look them in the eyes and you'll feel them, and you can't do that with this. And I said, what do you mean? And I can't recall what it's called, but their interview system that they use, they don't even look at you. They never look up. And I was like, huh?
That's kind of a bizarre interview system.
It is.
Yeah.
But I studied it like she told me to. And interestingly enough, I always feel led. We've discussed that. I always feel led, and I always listen to my spiritual being that's...
Right.
So I walk in for this interview, and I sit down, and inside this building, when you first go in this building, people who are applying for assistance and things like that, they're all on the downstairs level where you have to wait for your job interview. So I'm sitting down there and I'm checking everything out, and I'm looking around at this being very different from anything I've ever done, anything I've ever done. And then 2 security guards walk up and they're talking, and I can't help but eavesdrop on their conversation. I didn't mean to, but they're just right there. And so they're discussing a fire drill. And I'm like, they're planning a fire drill. So I was like, well, thank you for that tidbit of information. So during this interview, so I go up and we all introduce, and that's the only time they're looking at me in the eyes.
Right.
We introduce, and then they're looking at their papers. They asked one question that I answered the whole time they're looking down, and then the alarm goes off. Well, there's 3 women that are interviewing me, and they didn't know about it. Nobody had let them know. I'm the only one in the room that knows that there's a fire drill going on. So I was thankful for that. But they're looking at each other, and the one that actually ended up being my boss was asking, can I go back and get my purse? They're looking at each other. Before anybody says anything, I stand up and I slide my chair in, and I said, ladies, I don't know about in Arizona, but in Alabama, when we hear this sound, we head for safety. And I don't know which way I need to go down this hall, but if y'all don't mind showing me, I'd appreciate it. And so, just as calm as I could be. But so they're the ones that are nervous, and I could tell that the one lady had been through a house fire. And so as we go out, I am outside with everyone who works at Arizona Department of Economic Security. And so that was very...
And having the inside information that you knew it was a drill made you appear just extremely calm.
Yes. Yes.
And in control.
In control. Yes, yes. It did. Everybody was nervous, and I was just peace. So I looked at her, and I said to her, you realize this is just a drill, and you're okay. Your purse is okay, and even though you've been through a bad experience, that's not what this is. And she's just looking at me, and it was very interesting because later on, she was telling me how she was about to have a panic attack in front of everybody, but I had actually helped her to remain calm. And so everybody asked me, did I medicate before I went into this interview? And the answer to that is yes. Because I wanted these people to see me as I am, medicated, because medicated did not stop me from like I just told you, I worked 80 hours a week. So being medicated just kept me at a level where I could function and not be nauseous or not be in pain and not be in all these things that I normally have.
So you took that job and you was with it how long?
8 months, about 8 months. And
so that's the job you were doing when you got led to move back to Alabama?
Well, I was in the dispensary when I was led to move back, but I knew that there was things that I had to do before I came back. And so I took that job and I worked it, and I let everybody in the world know, that I'm working for the Department of Economic Security. So everybody in Alabama that had that old stigma, they are so confused because they're like, how did she go from working in a dispensary to working for the Department of Economic Security? And it was my boss, then her boss, and then the governor. So, that gave me also enough confidence to come back here. And when I stood up before the Senate to say things, it's like, don't you tell me that this is for end of life, because it's not. It's about the quality of the life that we have right now, not when we're on our deathbed.
Yeah, so I mean that was good training for you, and it was good for your resume.
Yes.
And it gave you the validity that you felt that you were lacking.
Yes.
Originally.
Yes, because I felt like something was missing, and that put that final piece to the puzzle before I did come back. And
so you felt that, as you stated, that Alabama needed help.
yes,
and that you were the person that could make a difference.
yes,
And you just mentioned, you said before you went in front of the
Senate.
The Senate. So that means you've been in front of the Senate since you've been back. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
So when I came back, I didn't want to, but I did hair. I did not want to, but it's always a fallback.
Right.
I made a lot of people sad when I left because I just abruptly left. And so when I came back, I had a lot of people that reached out to me that I was very honest with. I said, I love you. I loved doing your hair, but I'm not going to stay in hair. I would fill in the blanks, and it was it's like speaking that into existence. Before I met anybody from Ramp, or before I even came home, I knew that I was going to do something to fight for Alabamians. And so with that being said, I didn't come back and try really hard to create another salon business. I came back to do that.
Your life had changed so much since then. Yeah.
Yes, so much. And then also, I knew that I was battling something. Like, once I came back and I was not able to medicate the way that I could out there with the different options of the delivery systems for it, then I started having tremors. I started having symptoms that I couldn't ignore. And
so you started mildly regressing?
Very much so, extremely so much. Like I remember telling a girl at work, she was like, "Hey, Mandy, do you want some coffee?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want any coffee. That makes me shake, and I can't cut hair if my hands are shaking." Well, then I got to noticing it didn't have anything to do. I quit drinking coffee. I'm like, I'm still shaking. I'm like, what is this? And so yes, I had extremely so started regressing. When I was in Arizona, I took full extract cannabis oil several times a day. Like I always had vials of it on me, and a lot of people here don't understand, like if you get cut or if you get burnt, I had some major wounds that should take weeks and weeks and weeks for a diabetic to heal from, that I treated out there, that took me about 3 weeks to heal. And so there's a lot, you know, that I didn't have access to or options to here. And so I definitely started regressing. And so that's when the MS symptoms started rearing their nasty, and I say,
they were hidden up.
Yeah, their nasty heads was just like having.
So what have you done to offset that, to compensate for not having what you were used to that helped you?
Well, I've had to get extremely crafty. But one of the things, and I will say this, when medical marijuana is passed in Alabama, and when, or cannabis, whatever people want to call it, some people don't want you to call it marijuana, and you know, but I call it both just so everybody's happy. But I will always use CBD oil, because CBD has actually helped so many things in my body. I'm off 9 different medications.
So you're off 9 different medications because of CBD oil?
CBD, and, you know, and now I know, like, yes, CBD oil, but also some of the full extract cannabis oil that I use. But CBD started helping me before anything else. And so I started looking at that, studying that as much as I could on, like, why it helped. Like, I'm no longer on neuropathy medication. My diabetic specialist, he will feel my feet, and I love his little accent, and I can't do him justice, but he'll say, "Amanda, you have a pulse in your feet," and he's so amazed. And you know, I start talking to him about neurogenesis and CBD and the endocannabinoid system, and you know, all these things, and he's like, "Can you teach me about?" Because he's going through the list of all the things that I'm off of, and he's like, "Can you teach me about CBD?" And I'm like.
That's interesting when your doctor asks you to teach him about something.
Yes, but my question to him was, if I teach you how to heal your patients, do I still have to pay for today's visit?
Well, that's fair enough.
Right? I mean, you know, and we laugh about that, but in all fairness, like, I worked really hard to get the education. Just like he paid for an education, I went to the School of Hard Knocks to get mine.
Yeah.
It's a little different, but it's still the same.
Well, it's no different than a barter system.
Yes, and so with that being said, he is not the only one that says it. I have my general practitioner. He says the same thing. He says, "Amanda, I'm amazed, literally, because I don't hide anything. You know, I'll go in and I will say, you know, I use this amount of CBD and I use cannabis, and they're just extremely amazed. But just this past week, I had a teledoc phone call with my general practitioner, and he said, "Amanda, you don't need me." And I said, "I know, I'm playing the stupid insurance game. I don't need you. But to keep my other docs, I have to keep you."
Right.
And I said, "I'm playing y'all silly game. I don't need you." And then he said, "I want to say this to you." And I said, "I'm all ears." He said, "I have a wide variety, a mass amount of patients who use CBD for a wide array of different things, who all say it helps them. None of them have said it don't." And I said, "Thank you for that." And he said, "Keep up the good work." And we also had a conversation about my mental health, because he said, "I just want you to understand that most people who have been diagnosed with all that you have been diagnosed with, most of them commit suicide." And I'm
like with the PTSD and
PTSD, cancer, gastroparesis.
Yeah.
You know, some diabetics do because they can't
Oh
afford
yeah, and
their,
then now MS.
and MS and neuropathy, and I mean, there's just all of them combined.
I mean, it lowers the quality of life.
Extremely amount. You know, it does. And so I loved when he said, "I know how you're treating yourself." You know, he didn't, you know, I said, do you want me to elaborate? And he was like, I'm good. I know.
Okay, so I mean, you basically have to be more or less your own doctor.
Yes.
But you get the respect from the doctors that you're seeing now. And I take it that's how you got into, you got persuaded into or came across RAMP?
Well, I found RAMP. I was doing some studying one night because I was searching for groups in Alabama, and I found a couple of groups, and I don't want to say any names or disrespect anybody, but I found some groups that there was words, but there was no actions.
No, in Alabama it's probably Potheads Anonymous, you know.
Well, it actually seemed to be reputable groups,
Oh, okay.
but there was a lot of talk and no walk, and so I made quite a bit of effort reaching out to these other groups, and actually got discouraged. And this is kind of a
Well,
funny.
because they didn't have your advanced knowledge on the subject at that point, that you had at that point.
They didn't even respond. You know, if you're a group that's advocating for something and you got somebody like me that's got the history that
You
I've
should
got,
at least respond.
yeah, I mean, you should respond to anybody. But so I made I think I made one question to RAMP, and it was like, ba-bam, 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 you know, and it was like, and then it was inviting me, and it was.
I bet that was the President Marty Shelper. That
It
did
really was.
Because
It was.
she's on that like white on rice, you know. So.
It was Miss Marty, and the funny part about that is, I do suffer from PTSD. I did not mention I was raped at 15, and never did anything about it. Never fought it. Never.
So that added to the
Yes.
overall mental.
Yes, and so this whole time, you know, she goes by H. Marty, and so this person is responding to me, and it's like, you know, I'll meet you there, and here's my number, and.
So you didn't know if it was male or female?
Well, I just assumed it was male. I just
Right.
straight up assumed it was male, and so I go into the place, and I'm messaging this person. And this person had told me that they were there, and I had walked in, and there was a man sitting there, and I said, Marty, and I was expecting the man to say something, and Miss Marty said something, and I was so thrown off, I was so confused, I was like, wait, I thought I was talking to a dude this whole time.
Right.
But it was Miss Marty, and immediately, now I knew from her responses that she was passionate. But when I met her,
Oh, it exudes then, yeah.
yes, it exudes, and I was kind of, not in a bad way, but I was overwhelmed because it was nothing from these one people, and then it was a lot from Miss Marty, and a lot of people didn't know about me, but that I was trying to get settled back into my life here from being. Leaving in fear, being a medical refugee, and I had all these things going on with my life, and I was trying to figure out my footing and my place, and man, she was on fire, and she was asking me questions and doing this or that, and she'd invited me to.
She's very inspiring to you.
She was.
I mean, so you finally met somebody that had the same vehemency about the subject as you did.
Yes, but at the same time, I was overwhelmed because I was afraid I'd let her down.
Right.
Because she had so much passion, and I was like, with all my health issues and me trying to, I mean, I literally had nothing, you know, like I'm like, I've got to attain furniture and this and that, and, you know, all these different things. And I'm like, you know, I don't want to make a promise. I'm very true to my word. So I didn't want to make a promise to her or this group that I could not uphold.
Right.
And, then my health kept declining, but I'd spoke with her on different occasions, and I'd agreed, you know, that, you know, they're on fire. You know, they're really on fire. They're really passionate about what they do. Each one of them has their own.
I mean, and they're going to come close to accomplishing what you came back here to accomplish just by attaching to them that already exist.
That they had a base of a lot of the things, you know, and it's just like these people had been doing this for years,
Mm-hmm.
and quite honestly, I can't stress enough to people how exhausting when you're not getting paid to do something. A lot of people don't do it,
Oh, I know.
but Miss Marty, Miss Melissa, some of the other board members, it blew my mind and blew my heart. And that was one reason that I didn't accept right off the bat, was because I was afraid that I was going to let them down. Like,
Because they
that
were
sounds
doing
crazy.
all that for for free, just the
Yes.
goodness of their heart.
Yes. And Miss Marty, her story involves her sister passing from chemo poisoning. Miss Marty's very healthy.
Right.
Everybody else in the group, you know, has a whole lot of health issues for the most part. And, but even with her having, you know, healthy, like, as I see everything now, I don't know how she did what she did at all. And I have a lot of respect and a lot of love for everybody that's done anything. Senator Melson, I have the utmost respect for Senator Melson.
So you guys with the ramp, because we had went down and covered
Yes.
that when the first day it started. So you've had a little bit of success this year.
So I've actually got to go one-on-one. And that's something that I love about the folks at RAMP. I let them know, I'm like, y'all, I am ignorant when it comes to the whole legislative process, because in the hair industry, you're taught not to speak politics because you
Right.
could offend
Oh,
you
right.
lose your client base. So, like, I didn't watch the news. I didn't, you know, I would catch highlights and I wouldn't.
Yeah, you're admittedly ignorant of the whole process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I would study who I wanted to vote for, but those were not things I ever talked about or told anybody, a political party that I would be associated with. I just always kept all of that hush. And then also stepping into all that was a whole different realm to me, because, you know, you're at these meetings and you're hearing this erroneous information that you literally want to stand up and scream at the top of your lungs.
And you're not able to.
And you're not able to. But the funny part about me was the first one that I went to, because they had been doing it for a while, but when I moved back home, I can't remember at which number it was, but Senator Melson was not speaking to me, and I knew that. But I was sitting on the front row, and his words were, does anybody else have any questions or comments? And I raised my hand, and I'm watching him, and I knew he was speaking to his committee. And I see his face like, you know, what am I going to do? Kind of, you know, it was like, I can't ignore her. There's cameras back there. There's, you know, I can't ignore her. So his words were, you know, basically I was speaking to my committee, but I will let you speak briefly. And so that was when I spoke for the first time, and literally to go from worrying about how people were going to accept me in Alabama to standing up in front of them and saying, I have to have medical marijuana to actually function in life. Admitting that, you know, in front of all those people, and worrying about what backlash might...
What kind of repercussions it may have.
Yes. But at the time, none of that mattered to me. It was, I literally had to speak or bust. And so that's when I say that I felt that I was led. You know, I came back, I spoke, but the true change and the things for me was being a part of RAMP and learning what it actually takes to make changes with any kind of laws that we have.
And Marty's a good teacher, the president of RAMP, because she fully comprehends all of that.
She does. And Melissa, I mean, I have to get them to literally explain things to me. And on lobby days, it's so important for people to get out of your
House.
closet. I will say those words. Get out of your marijuana closet and actually be honest and show these political leaders that this is something that's important to you and you are a productive member of society. You use it,
Yeah, because nobody shows up, they're not going to take it serious.
Exactly, and they don't know. And that's the thing that people don't understand, that if someone who is a political leader don't know that their constituents stand behind that, they're not going to stand up for it because they're afraid they're going to lose their position.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that I was so happy about with them. And so on lobby days, I got to go into these people that, you know, we do our homework, and we know who's hardcore knows, and so, you know, we go around. We do spend the time thanking the ones that are, but we spend, like, I can't say that for me. I did one or two people, but I wasn't going to waste my time with people who are already for it. But I went to those people who I knew were hardcore no's. And not to mention any names, I won't, but there was one that he was such a hardcore no. And when I walked in the door and said, "Hi, my name's Amanda Taylor and I'm with RAMP," he looked at his watch and he said, "You have about a minute and 20 seconds. Like, he didn't even say a minute and a half. He said, "You got a minute and 20 seconds. Just
So very condescending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I sat down with him and I started speaking and I started telling him my story. And so that minute and 20 seconds turned into 15 minutes, and then that 15 minutes turned into 30 minutes, and then...
So he didn't try to push you out?
No, he was crying.
How so?
Because...
Just because of your story?
Because my story touched a chord with his daughter's life. And everything that I was speaking of was things that, as I was about to say to him, his words to me, and I will say this, his words to me right there in that state building were, "Can you just not get what you need off the streets?"
Really?
Those were his words. And I looked at him and I said...
So you got a top level politician basically intimating that you should go break the law.
Yes. And so I looked at him and I almost said, "Would you say that to your wife?" And that spiritual side of me that we were talking about earlier said, "He don't respect his wife." And so, and these words were about to come out, and it changed to daughter, and I did not know why I said daughter, you know, other than I know he don't respect his wife, but I said, "So you're telling me if this was your daughter, you would tell your daughter to go to people who might sell crack, might sell heroin, might sell whatever,
Right.
to get something that God put on this earth for everybody to have? That's what you're telling me? Let me get this straight. That's what you're telling me, that you would tell your daughter." And I kept saying, "Your daughter," and they do at RAMP teach us, no matter how angry you get, be respectful. No matter how angry you get, because when you're talking about your life...
That's probably not where I'm not a member.
Well, you need to be. But but that is very true and very important, because I was very angry at that man to tell me to go break the law when all he has to do is change his vote, and I would not be breaking the law.
Right.
And so when I said daughter, it was like somebody turned on a porch light. And he started asking me different questions about my health. And I was like, oh.
So you knew he was associating what you were saying with something he knew.
Yes.
And knew intimately.
Yes. And then I realized that it was his daughter. And so I asked him, I said, "How long has your daughter suffered with this, this, and this?" And he just started weeping. Just weeping. And so I looked at him and I said, "Sir," I said, "I would like, on behalf of RAMP and all Alabamians, I would like to thank you for changing your no to yes." I didn't say if. That's how I left him.
Yeah.
And I didn't let him end the meeting. I ended the meeting.
Right.
And one of my senator friends called me and he said, "Woo-wee, woo-wee, you did something big. You did something really big."
Changed somebody's mind that was unchangeable.
Yes.
No doubt.
And he said, he said to me that day, "Your story, your voice, everything needs to be seen and heard. The next time there's a lobby day, you better hit every door." And so that's what makes changes.
So this is basically your mission right now.
My sole purpose in life.
Right. Now you do, you can touch a little bit on the farming
Yes.
aspect of it and growing.
Okay. So when I came back to Alabama and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I did hair, there's this extremely wealthy man that I know that I called up. I was like, hey.
A lot of women would like to say that. There's a wealthy man I know.
Well, it's funny. I think I'm one of the only blondes that don't call him for, but I called him up. I was like, I'm confused at why you, Alabama has legalized hemp. You've got more money than anybody I know. Why are you not involved in some kind of grow or, and he just giggled and giggled and giggled. And I was like, what's the deal? And he's like, you need to come over. And I was like, no. I said, I'll meet you out for dinner or something. But, anyway, I said, we can talk in public, blah, blah, blah. And so.
Because you had misinterpreted.
Well, no, I know him.
Oh, okay.
I know him. And
so
he kept calling. And he called me up and he was like, "No, man, I'm not calling for a date. Just hear me out." And I said, "Okay, I'm listening. I'm all ears." He said, "There's some guys I really think that you need to talk to." And I had actually pulled a list from the state of Alabama. And I had pulled farmers. And if people walked in, they'd probably think I was a serial killer because I had this board up and it had farmers and I had yarn stretched out from like where they were farming. And when I say that I was led into all this, it was just like I knew that there was something for me with that, but I didn't know what it was. And so when he called me about these guys, it's in my hometown. And I was like, what are you saying?
Wow.
And so it is actually Alabama's first dry facility, extraction facility.
And it's your hometown.
It's in Coleman, Alabama. It's in Coleman, Alabama. And so I was so excited. And so I called these guys up. He gave me one of the guys' numbers, and there's 4 investors, and I requested a meeting, and so I had this meeting with them, and I sat down and talked with them, and before I ever went there, I started visualizing the facility and visualizing like where they're at, and what they're going to do, and where I saw it. And, a lot of times somebody will ask me, like when I was doing hair, one of the first big time companies that hired me on to be an educator was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, running this company, and,
Right.
And so,
right.
It was like, in that space and time, we were discussing things, and their plan was to take it to crude and just sell it as crude and not take it any further. And I was like, no, guys, like this wasn't even a true interview. This was just a meeting.
Right.
And I'm like, no, guys. I was like, let me tell you what we're going to do. And, and in my words, and people cannot call it medicine if they don't want to, and that's fine. Like the FDA is extremely crucial and critical on what you say and what you can't say.
Oh, absolutely. I know that. 100%.
So I legally can't call it medicine.
Right.
But, and the FDA
I mean, to me, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, enzymes, they're all medicines.
Right. It is.
Because
and so
it's what it is.
It is what it is. And so I use the word dietary supplement, because that's what the FDA is okay with for whatever reason. But so I go to work, or I go with these guys on an interview, and I tell them my thoughts, and then they give me a tour of the facility. Like I hadn't even seen all the facility when I'm telling them. The extraction equipment's not even put up and together yet. And so I'm touring, and I'm like, I'm going to work here. I'm going to.
You're feeling good about it.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to work here. And then it was like that knowing that you and I were talking about. Let me know these guys are show me guys. They're not tell me. So all that experience that I had out west really wasn't. It was important for me to tell them, but it was more important for me to show them my work ethic, and because also they knew folks that knew me and knew that I had already gone and spoke before the Senate, so they knew that I was a cannabis activist. So even though they were in the hemp stuff. They're not people that have
That's auxiliary.
right,
You know.
but they're not people who were partakers. I'll say that. And so
Oh, they're investors.
right, and so I showed up. I went and worked my salon job, put my blue jeans on, and went over there and would do what the men were doing, in the drying facility. And, they would just kind of, and I never went in there with anything other than, what we got going on today, guys, and I'm going to do this. And, if there was something that needed to be done, they didn't have to tell me. I would do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'll do this.
Very proactive.
Very proactive, extremely proactive. And so they saw all that, and right at the 2-week mark, I was preparing myself for what I was like, I know I'm about to have a conversation. These are my points I want to bring up. And so I turn around, I'm working one day, and they're all standing around me, and I'm looking around, and they said, well, we can't have you working here for free. And I looked at them and I said, well, what if I was interviewing you guys? What if I was checking y'all out to make sure I wanted to work for y'all? And we laughed, and I told them when the extraction facility was completed, I was like, I really would like for y'all to think about me kind of maybe running some of this, and at the time, this was such a brand new company that roles were not even established. And so there is a female that worked there that does accounting things, but here I am hand to hand like a machine. So that stuff would intimidate a lot of people. It's millions of dollars worth of equipment that didn't even come with instructions.
Right.
And so they listened to everything that I had to say, and actually when the extraction facility got to start, it was me and another guy that were basically running it. And so I have had a hand.
So you did get not only hired on, you're part of it, really.
Yes, sir. I'm definitely part of it. I have been a part of harvest in the first year, drying, the extraction facility, and even my background in when I was younger, I worked in a pharmacy, and then I went to work in one that was a compounding pharmacy. So I even have.
So a compounding pharmacy background, even if it was a long time ago, that was quite poignant in what you're doing now.
It very much is.
It's just an extension of it.
It is an extension, and so I actually get to be a part of every bit of that company from seed to sale.
Wow.
And so I'm currently helping them to build a brand. And
right. It all goes hand to hand. You come back here, you're getting into the political aspect of it. You're helping to create and start, from a ground level, this company. And so you said, cannabis, hemp, just cannabis was the center of your life, and it looks like that you've made it that way in a relatively short period of time.
Yes. And something that I want to touch on with that is when I was in Arizona, there was nothing as fulfilling to me as a patient coming back to me and telling me whether they were out of pain or whether they were able to sleep. Just any improvement of the quality of their life was something. I thought when I did people's hair and they felt fabulous when they left, I thought that was something major.
Right.
And so, I know you understand this, but when they walked out with a much better quality of life, that was something that spoke to my spirit in a manner that it sickened me to know that Alabamians were
deprived.
Yeah.
And
so one of the things that I loved on the farm was getting to be a part of their research and development of their product. There was a family that had, try not to leak, an 8-year-old autistic child who had never slept a full day in its life. So when I say this, everyone keep in mind that what this child was treated with was something that I saw grow from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So this child was given its first dose of CBD, and the parents were so amazed because that night, that child slept the entire night.
The first night.
The first night, not like a week, or because CBD affects people differently. It depends on your body chemistry. So one person, it might work immediate. One person, it might take the full 4 weeks for it to, really respond. So with that being said, this parent, think about the exhaustion of the two parents. So you have the child that had never slept in 8 years, a full night's sleep. So that meant...
And you have the exhaustion of the parents who's had to deal with the kid being awake for all that time.
So then I got to talk to him a little bit more down the line. And this child would hurt itself. And the parents called it the autistic rage.
Self-abuse.
Yeah, like and stuff that they couldn't control, like banging its head or try not to cry, but when you hear a parent tell you that child is sleeping through the night, and then that those fits are not happening. They were telling me, like, this child would literally hurt them and itself.
Right.
And when that father looked at me and said, Amanda, the worst thing that we have been dealing with her with is when she gets to where she used to have those fits, this is all that happens. And I'm like, I will spend my last breath to make sure that Alabamians have the right to what they need. I mean, that I have so many research and development stories.
I mean, that's a big one.
But that one alone.
Yeah.
So if that helped, I mean, I know how much, if cannabis could be just a small, I know because I've seen it firsthand. And so those are the things that make me have the passion and the fight. It's not just for me. I mean,
the stories are endless, and the health challenges that it can alleviate or help or assist slightly to complete amelioration.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think you've got an amazing history.
Thank you.
And you've had quite an interesting experience in your short period of time here on this earth, of 40-something years old. So in encapsulating all this, and before we close, is there anything that you would like to disseminate to the individuals watching this that you feel needs to be said and maybe you haven't said yet?
Don't leave it to all of us who are extremely sick to do all the work. There is something that I say here, that more Alabamians are in the marijuana closet than they are the sexuality closet. And I really can't stress enough of how important it is. And again, I'm trying not to cry, but I see people every day that suffer, and I'm not speaking of myself, because y'all know that I've gotten in that car before, and I have drove 2,000 miles away, 3,000 miles away to get help. I could do that again, but it's not about that. It's not about me. It's not. It's about the fact that it takes very little to change legislation. It takes Alabamians standing up and speaking to their political leaders so their political leaders know how important this actually is, so that they don't have fear of not getting reelected because they are standing up for something that they don't know where people are at. So if you'll step out of that marijuana or cannabis closet, whatever you want to call it, and actually join RAMP, call your senators, your legislators, your House of Representatives, call the governor. I don't care who you call, as long as you call them and as long as you email them, because all those calls have to be logged. You know, they cannot deny us. They cannot deny us. There is power in numbers. And I'm not saying that people have to go out there and be violent or act ugly. I am saying that there is a respectful way to speak to your political leaders and make them hear you. And you need to step up and be the change that all of us want to see. And a lot of people, when I talk to them, they get very aggravated and they say, well, you know, Alabama's law is so strict, blah, 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 and I just stop them. Like, it's just like, I will almost be rude and almost karate chop them, and tell them, you know, you have to understand that they are afraid of the word recreational. They are. But what you need to focus on right now is safe access to medical cannabis, and don't worry about something that has nothing to do with anything right now. You just focus on the fact that there are people like myself who suffer greatly daily that don't have to. I have seen so much healing from working in the industry, and there is miseducation. And that's where things need to change. It needs to change with people actually speaking to their leaders and education. Another thing, one more thing, is that a lot of people that I speak to are afraid to speak up because they have children. And that is something that I have several friends who are suffering from leukemia and cancer, and I'm tired of losing friends and family members to chemo poisoning. And these same people should have the right to cannabis and not be judged or their children taken or have a fear of that. That's hugely important to me also. But those are that's I'll try to end with that, but I'll talk forever on it. But those are the things that are most.
Well, Amanda, I really appreciate you taking the time and having the courage to share your story with
Thank
everybody
you.
today.
Thank you.
And I have no doubt that it will help and assist many people. And you keep doing what you're doing, because what you're doing is a brilliant thing. And check back in with us later on and let us know how you're advancing.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, that was Amanda Taylor and her story. And I would like to say thank everyone for listening to this long-form interview today. I hope it gave you something to think about that maybe you haven't thought about before. And maybe you too can reevaluate things for yourself or your loved ones. Until next time, this is Tom Hubbard for the Community Spotlight. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.